in case you're on the phone, you will see everything in the slides except the live demos. We will also record the live demos, a screencast as the whole presentation, and make it available afterwards for everyone via a video stream, YouTube channel, etc. Next important thing, if you go to slide 2, we have an agenda. We won't need the full 4 hours, but very important, if you want to ask questions and you have questions to one of those items, after each slide set, after each chapter, we have inserted a Q&A slide in this presentation. In this presentation, everyone who has the link can write and delete, so please be careful if you delete. The point is that you put your questions after in this slide, and we will then, the presenter will then answer the questions. I hope this is clear to everyone, and then let's start. First, the who is who. I won't go through all the participants. The list is public available. The email is not. The email list you have received in the invitation. So if you want to exchange, if you want to start an exchange between yourself and someone else, please use the emails provided this way. We have 3 kind of groups here in this presentation. From governmental sides, it's Swisstopo, the Swiss Federal Office of Roads. Then we have cantons from Switzerland, Neuchâtel and Canton of Zurich. And we have from Luxembourg, the administration Cadastre de la Topographie. And we have the Bavarians from Germany here with the Bayern Atlas. Then we have private companies, ITV Consulting, AG, Camptocamp, Nice AG, Hexagon Switzerland, Caden and Partner, Geops from Germany, Switzerland, and GIS Consultancy Services Private Limited. Welcome. From the NGO side, there's the Swiss Alpine Club. Responsible person won't be part of this meeting because it became ill just 1 hour ago. So that is number 1. I would like now to give the word for the next 15-20 minutes to Florent Gravin, Camptocamp. Florent, I pass it over to you. Florent, you have to unmute yourself, or
I think Florent is having trouble joining the meet. I'm just going to check 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Florent is having a technical issue. Should be 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, so I'm just going to start for now, and Florent is going to come later and pick up the presentation. So I'm just going to present myself. My name is Olivier Guyot. I'm a developer from Camptocamp. Okay, so the first part of this presentation is just a summary of what happened in the recent OpenLayers history. So you see there's a graph here. So the graph starts at the appearance of Mapbox JL.js. So that was 6 years ago. And then introduction of the vector ties formats. So you see that the blue line is the version, OpenLayers versions. So there was a version 4 in 2017, which started supporting the vector ties. Then we went from version 4 to version 5 in about 1 year. During this time, as a side note, also the OL Mapbox style library was created, which enabled a better integration with the Mapbox formats. So version 5 was a big work on OpenLayers on the architecture of the library. We'll come to that later. And then we went from 5 to 6 in about a year and a half. And so the library stayed in beta before version 6 for several months, and we introduced a new WebGL renderer there. How do can you switch? Yeah, sorry. Okay, so OpenLayers 5 was a really big effort on the library, but really on the code architecture. There were new features, but not that much compared to other major versions. And specifically, the library went to migrated to ES6 modules, so there was no more closure. So the library became much better integrated with the modern build tools that front-end developers use. Okay, Florent is there. Florent, can you hear us? Okay. So at the version 5, the library was very stable state and was used a lot, but I think the community was expecting new features and basically new things in the library. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, Florent is going to take over. Okay.
We do hear you.
Okay, sorry, I'm very sorry. So all the work done on the version 5 was more on developer experience, so as Olivier said. And when we see this line, we can see that we have other solutions that already propose good experience on vector tiles and have WebGL renderer and things like that. So the community and the users were allowed to think, to want more vectors, want more performance, want WebGL, want more beautiful map, as they can see in other solutions. And from that, we started to think about what could be the next release about. And thanks to Swisstopo, we gathered in early 2018. and we discuss about what will be the future of OpenLayers rendering, because we always catch the train of concurrency, and now things are evolving fast, and we want OpenLayers to keep on Rails. So from that, we did at Camptocamp, we lead a long phase of work toward this goal to improve vector tiles rendering in OpenLayers. And we did a technical analysis in 2018, and we proposed this analysis to the community to see how it is accepted, and we gave the feedback to Swisstopo. And from all those work, we start to work on the OpenLayers 6 release. We meet all at SASFE, and it was the starting point for this release. We had a long way to work through to reach the goal of the 6th release, and this goal is to optimize vector tiles rendering. So in SASFE, we gather all, we worked all together with the community, so all core developers of OpenLayers, and we were at a state where we were analyzing what are the performance now in 2017, 2018, how are the performance, is it satisfying enough? And we were seeing with the users how we can judge the performances. Is it about a feeling that it's not fast enough? Is it about concrete metrics like FPS? Is it that the rendering is not beautiful enough? And is it about the canvas that is a limitation? So we were thinking all of that together. So we as a community organized ourselves to try to see what we can do in OpenLayers to respond to those issues. So we start to work on the core code, and we check where we can find room for improvement. Is it during the preparation of the vector tiles? We can maybe parallelize the process, optimize the parsing, or is it during the rendering phase? Can we optimize the style function? Can we avoid useless garbage collection things and stuff like that? So we did a lot of investigation, and from that, we set up an action plan together, and we said, okay, the first thing that is important is to set up a metric system so we can be sure when we try to improve that there is no regression, that the performance are still okay, and that go in the right direction and the performance are better. Then we wanted to work on web workers because we think it was something crucial to optimize the performances. We wanted to improve Mapbox style integration, to work on the idea to have a composite renderer. And we also were aware that WebGL is the best technology to display vectors data. So we wanted to work on WebGL. So we had different things to work on. And we imagined different alternatives if the conclusion were not satisfying enough. So like using another third-party library to render the vector tiles for us, like Mapbox.js, or like another WebGL library like 3JS. So the first thing we implemented and we work on, it was the really basis of this release and all the work we done is the composite rendering. And it allowed many use cases to be implemented after that. Before, OpenLayers displayed all the layers, all the data as a monolithic block. So it did the final composition in the browser of all the layers in a 2D canvas. It wasn't optimized, and the problem with that is that all the map has to be in canvas. After that, what we set up with the composite rendering, we tell that all layers, all different kind of layers are in charge of their own rendering. So it means one layer, from the moment they implement a render function and they return an HTML element, they can be integrated to the map. So it opens really new doors to include different kind of layers in our map. So what is great with that is that now we can have a WebGL layers. If for example, we have a million of points and we want to display them, we can have a WebGL layers, but in our map, we can still have other layers in Canvas as we had before in our applications. Concretely, here there is a map, and we can see in the viewport we have a lot of canvas, so one per layer. And what is great with that is that the browser do the final composition, so we can use CSS rules to manage the opacity, to manage the visibility, and to manage the filter, the z-index, the order, and things like that. So the browser do many things for us. I talk about the metrics. So we set up a little tool where we have automatic scenarios of vector tiles rendering, and at each commit, each release, we pass all these tests and we analyze the average FPS to be sure and to track potential regression. For the multi-threading, we did integrate the possibility to use web workers in OpenLayers. So it's available in the architecture, and now for any need, we can use web workers. We haven't done that for vector tiles, but we did some proof of concept where we were parsing and analyzing vector tiles in the tiles. And we did also a proof of concept using the technology off-screen canvas that is not mature enough, and where the canvas is rendered in the thread and passed to the main application. And it's really promising, so it's great because when it's going to be supported by the browser, I think we are ready to integrate that to OpenLayers. So multi-thread processing was more investigation, and we don't use it at the moment for the vector type. Now, to talk about the real core development we did in the renderer, we spent a lot of time and we did heavy enhancement in OpenLayers renderer core to improve the canvas, 2D canvas renderer. So it was a lot of things. I will talk about that in the next slide. And beside that, we also wanted to create a new WebGL vector tile renderer because it didn't exist in the API. So we tried the two approaches to see what is possible to do in the time we have. For the 2D canvas optimization, there was many, but the thing was to optimize the way canvas render vector tiles and vector data in general. So improving the rendering loop to ensure we have at least 60 FPS, optimize garbage collection, the decluttering, the text. So this involved heavy work in OpenLayers core, but in OL Mapbox style library as well. For instance, we had improved transition. So this is just a visual example. On the left, it was before. There was one image per tile level. So it was blurry. And on the right, we just recreate a new image at each zoom level, even though we haven't fetched the next tile yet. So the user experience is really better, but it doesn't really improve performances. So it illustrates what I was talking about before, and how we can judge that the application is smooth and fast. The next thing is WebGL, because we are still convinced at Camptocamp that WebGL is the best technology to provide good performances and vector tiles. So we really pushed WebGL to the community. The community was not really a fan of WebGL. They didn't really like it because they actually don't really know. And we have a good experience on WebGL, so we really insist that we want to put a WebGL back in OpenLayers. So we really keep the focus on that, and we are we really think that in the end OpenLayers should be full in full WebGL. So there was already some WebGL in OpenLayers, but it was not maintained and deprecated. So we decided to remove it all and start to rewrite a brand new WebGL API 4 points. So it's great because we have good experience with WebGL, and we are able to work toward a better rendering system with WebGL. All the results of this work, of this release, have been to be able to push the 2D canvas rendering to the limit. So I think we can't do really better with OpenLayer 2D canvas rendering at the moment. And the results are really promising for overlay vector layers, but not for complex base map layers where there is a lot of data. We figured out that it was not what we could expect. It's great, it's better, but it's still not enough for a production application that have great ambitions. So for us, the conclusion is that WebGL is mandatory to display base map layer as vector tiles. And from that, we have two possible directions. Use a third-party library like MapBoxGL.js inside an OpenLayers map and improve. So this is more the short-term solution, and in a long-term solution will be to improve the WebGL renderer to be able to display vector tiles in WebGL. This is the conclusion we had. So first use case that appears from the work on this release was to be able to use Mapbox library in a WebGL in an OpenLayers map. So this is thanks to Composite renderer. Now we were able to create a new layer type, a MapBoxGL.js layer, and this layer actually loads MapBoxGL.js library and integrate and bind and synchronize a Mapbox map with an OpenLayer maps. And this is very promising. Here we have the example. So this is an OpenLayer map. The boundaries is a 2D canvas OpenLayers layers, and the background is a MapBoxGL.js layers inside of an OpenLayer map. So we have the same performances, the same rendering, exactly what we expect. And this could go in production when we have committed something in MapBoxGL.js library. So this use case is very promising, and we can say that, okay, for a short-term solution, we have very good result to have vector tiles in OpenLayers map. Another use cases that appears from this work was thanks to the WebGL work. So it brings new opportunities to render data, and what is important for web viewer application is to be able to render vector data because we can style them, we can interact with them more easily, and we have a good potential not to display data, but to value data. So that is very important for people who provide the data to your platform. So with the new API, we use a new styling method based on expression, and we can use external variable as expression in our style expression. So it means that we can have the time or other parameters that move and the style change with this the variable change. So we are able to do things over time, for instance. So this is an example of a work we've done with on that. So this is a 2D canvas background layers with the WebGL layers. So it's very fast. We can have different kind of rendering. It's very fast. And here we have binded the WebGL context, the WebGL viewport with an external web component. So it's CartoDB Airship web component that is originally used with Mapbox, but we created a bridge to use it with OpenLayers and WebGL renderer. And we can see that the style evolve depending on external variables. So it's not done with the style function, it's just done with style expression and variables. So the interaction go from the graph to the map, but also go from the map to the graph. When we change the viewport, we can see that the value have changed here. So this has a great potential for new use cases, because I think nowadays people want to see a thing like that, and it's great that OpenLayers can render the same, give the same display and the same user experience. So to conclude on this presentation of the release, I will really thanks Swisstopo and the partners to have engaged the reflection and the work about the performances. And I think it was a very special release for the community because we really organized this release as a project where we had specification, where we organized the team, and when we expected results. And it has been I think one of the best opportunity the community had to all federate around one goal to make OpenLayers great again because of the history I showed before. And I think, yes, it was a very, very good experience, and we put back OpenLayers back on the scene. I think, yes, we give back a lot of activities. We really get closer with the community. We really work all together in the same direction. So we really give a new life to OpenLayers. And what is really important is that we give also a vision, a roadmap on what can be done now for the future. And we all share the same idea. So thanks for the fundings of Swisstopo and all the partners. We reach a lot of money through OpenLayers Association that really help the community to work towards those ambitions. The community were really well organized and work really together all along this release with 3 code sprints, with 3 presentations at FOSS4G, so good promotion of the work done, and everything knows now that OpenLayers can be used in a more efficient way, and it's great. It's great for the solution. So a lot of work, more than 2,000 commits from Andreas, Camptocamp, team, and other people. Many contributions, and I think from all of this work, it will be really important to keep the great momentum we set up over the past 2 years during this release. I think we created something new that we must keep. So we must keep the effort of research and development, of improving the technology, of working together as a community to continue the work we have done so far for this release. And to me and to Camptocamp, we think that it passed through a better WebGL support to support lines, polygon, vector tiles, and to be faster than Mapbox GL JS, hopefully. Okay, so I think I've presented all things about the release. So now if you have question or if you want to react, I don't know what the next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Florent. If the attendees would like to write some questions, are there in the presentation?
Okay, then I propose, if there's no question in the slide, again, then I propose we go onward with Florent, web maps with OpenLayer modules. And I would also like to remind you, if you have questions, even during the talk, please note them down. In this case, it's in slide 50 for this section. Just drop your questions there and we will answer it afterwards. Florent, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, yeah, I was muted. Okay, I go forward. I've presented all the work done by the community for the 6th release. And now I'm going to talk about the knowledge we gathered and the return of experience we have at Camptocamp on how to use OpenLayers and OpenLayers modules in modern application, in modern web viewer for the last 3-4 years. So, a web map application with OpenLayers. I want to create a web map application, okay, but where do I start? So one thing that is really important here to notice is that there is no silver bullet. Every project, every need are different, and every project needs its own design. There is no ideal solution, and it really depends on your constraint, your the team you have, your expectation, and the architecture depend on that. And I will try during this presentation to show you, to illustrate, depending on the use cases, depending on the size of your project, depending on your constraint, what are the best practice to integrate OpenLayers in a modern application. So when you start a new project and you have an ambition to create a big project, there is different things you have to take care about. First is what is important for your project. Long-term maintainability, so the code will last. High quality requirements, the code will be beautiful. It will be great, well organized. Top performance, the application will be fast and great. Fast results, low development cost means I want to have something quick, but maybe there will be a drawback about another point like maintainability. Ease of onboarding new developer. If I know I will have turnover or the project will last, I want people come in the project, can work efficiently, quickly. So it's all about a project management and project architecture design that must respond the best way possible depending on your constraints and your expectation to all these points. I want to add that there is the priority of this depend on you. It's not more important to have better maintainability than fast results. It just depends on you, okay? So overall, you will need to do compromise, and the strategy you will adopt will depend on your expectation and the way, the thing you have to leverage. And I will try to illustrate, depending on that, what will be the best solution for you. First, at Camptocamp, it's more a return of experience I'm going to do. We work on a lot of projects using OpenLayers and modern framework or framework agnostic or thing like this. So at Camptocamp, we have, for example, a lot of projects using Angular. It's big project from Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Environment. So it's several million projects that are using a framework, and they are happy with that because it's feature packaged, it's work with the state management, it's for big projects. So we have high quality requirement, we embrace software craftsmanship philosophy and things like that. We try to do the perfect project, but it has a cost. We have other projects that maybe are smaller or different and doesn't need to have all of this package. And we can also do application without any frameworks when it's not needed, with NGM, Swiss Rondo, etc. We have long-lived solutions that use OpenLayers for a long time, over years, with a large community. We have experiments with different kind of framework, Angular, React, and Vue. And we also still have projects with legacy code with AngularJS like Geoportal. So just this slide is just to tell that we have all different kind of projects, and we have different kind of implementation because there is no one good solution for all. The third thing that is really important nowadays, and that I changed from before, is that all these applications are mainly component oriented. This is very important because it helps your application to segregate the responsibility inside one component. So all the logic is encapsulated into the component, and it's great. So you can reuse this component, but you also can maintain it, and because it's easier to test. This approach is great, but all components are not reusable in an application. It's important to distinguish smart component and dumb component. Smart components are application dedicated component where you have the business and the logic specific to your application. And dumb components are presentational components and are just receive input and display things. So this architecture of components help you to think about where to put my logic, to segregate the logic, and to be sure your code is well organized. And it's great for big ambition application. This really fit well for map-oriented application because all map controls and tools are kind of always the same. Drawing, querying, navigating, scale, legend, etc. So they are largely reusable. Here is an example of this kind of architecture. So there is an application, a web map. You have a viewport with a sidebar and a map. So the component architecture is a tree, and it fits the DOM tree. It's great because there is a good maintainability and reusability. If your components are really reusable, you can implement them in your application, but you can also think with a wider way of externalizing some components in a library. So this is the same schema, but I added a scale component and my legend component. Because they are really generic, I can start to create a library of generic components. It's better for code mutualization, and organizing your code in component and in libraries really helps you to have a cleaner code because of the dependency, to avoid dependency cycles and to be sure you control your dependency. To illustrate this approach, here there is a graph of a big project we have. It's a back office, it's a map viewer, and we organize the code in different libraries. So we have UI libraries for the layout, for the map component. We have the map state library that manage the state of the application. We have something to manage the styling of the layers. And we can see here that organizing your application this way help to segregate the logic and to ensure that you don't have strange dependency direction, to be sure there is no cycle dependency, and to be sure your application is really well organized and that each piece of code has its own responsibility. So it's very important to organize your code this way. And this library could be reused in other applications. For instance, here there is two applications, a chart application and a back office application sharing the same shared code. When your application grows, on top of this component-based architecture, we can introduce a state management architecture. So this is great because it's a secure REST pattern, and it helps you to maintain a single source of truth in your application and be sure that all components share the same model at the same time. Many libraries are available to do that for all frameworks, and it ensures a good quality code because all the logic is very simple to test. It's just about how to update the state of your application. Then your component should listen to the state changes. Back to the library system I talked before. it's great with the state is that we have some application where the application has its own state, the state application. And when we develop a library for something specific and reusable, the library can also have its own state. And what is great is that frameworks today can combine states, and then the result of the application state is just the bindings between the root application state and the lib state. So every library is independent, can carry its own state, and the application can link library and build the big state around that. Here, there is an example of a map state. So I have a map container bind to a state, and here it's an example of what is a state. It defines how is the map at one time. So the center, the zoom, the different layers, and stuff like that. The architecture is more interesting now because before we have to pass from the parent to the children all the input value for the component. And when the component changes a value, we have to emit an event and put it back to the parent, and back to the children. So for instance, the legend need the map. It's very hard to communicate. Through the state, it's great because all components, they listen to the state, so they can listen to a change in the state. So for instance, legend will listen on the layers of the map. And they can also emit a change in the state. So they are all independent, and they can all talk to the state. So it really helps again on responsibility segregation on your design architecture. Here it illustrates better the notion of smart and dumb component, because with the state, for instance, presentation component could be the legend. It just needs to know what to display, what image to display. But to know what image to display, I need to be binded to the state, and it's going to be the smart component, the container component, that include the state and pass the raw value to a presentational component. Another concept that is interesting when your application grows is all what I talk about now wasn't really binded to a framework. It's just general. So whatever framework you use, or even if you don't use framework, you have to use this concept of oriented application, of state if you need one, etc. But of course, when you want to design a big application, you need to think about a framework. There is 3 main frameworks on the market. Which one to choose? It's always a big concern. From our experience, I would say that there is no good framework. The best framework is the framework that works with your team. With all frameworks, you will be able to achieve the same results. You will be able to build a good application. If you have the best practice in all framework, you will be able to have a working production application as you expected, whatever the framework you choose. And all the concept I'm talking about in this presentation doesn't depend on a specific framework. They are conceptual and they work whatever the framework you choose. So this is not a real concern. It's true that at Camptocamp we have a good experience with Angular, and even though some people doesn't like this framework because it brings maybe too many things, project with Angular work perfectly well because they bring a lot of things like build chain, unit testing, dependency injection. They embrace reactive programming with observables, and it's awesome when you use a state to be able to use observables. We coupled Angular with Narwhal, that is an overlay on the CLI to have monorepo oriented application, and it's great and it works on very big projects with OpenLayers. When the application grows on top of this framework, we also experience something called the clean architecture, when it segregates the responsibility between layers. And it's really important here to have this kind of experience, because what this model tells, it tells that your domain, your business logic, so a map has some layers that have some styles, are always the same. whatever the framework you use, whatever, yes, it's always the same. So it's in the middle of the architecture. You define all your model, all your business logic, and then use cases will interact with your model. And the blue layers outside is the integration model. It's the implementation model. How to implement the business logic I have defined in my domain. This pattern is great and works well with the frameworks because you can have your model, your business logic, and you can implement this business logic either with Mapbox, either with OpenLayers, either with Cesium. So what is great here is that your domain eventually attached with a state is able to carry all the business logic and to have nothing related to a third-party library. And all the work of the third-party library is implemented in the blue layers that are swappable. Okay, so everything I talk about is works for every project, not only web mapping project. It's true for all the projects. So now, okay, you have a great architecture, a great framework. You want to have a web mapping library. Of course, choose OpenLayers. It's why you are here today to talk to her about OpenLayers. Of course, you can have different web mapping library binding to your application. But what is great with OpenLayers is that it's owned by a community. It's not proprietary. It's cover most of the use case you will need. There is no opinion doesn't carry an opinion like MyBox really carry the opinion that the most important thing is how to render efficiently vector tags, but there is many other things in a web map application. And it works really well with other with frameworks, with different kind of architecture and things like that. Guillaume will talk about another kind of architecture, not based on framework, with NGM. He will present framework and agnostic architecture that already works really well with OpenLayers or other framework. The idea behind this presentation is really to make you understand that all applications are different, all projects are different, and depending on your project, you have seen there is always an answer of what is the best architecture I can design for this specific need. And we can from this return of experience, we can provide good example and good guidelines on depending of what you want, what is the best architecture to fit your expectation. What is important as well is that the framework, choose the framework your team like, because the dev team will have the responsibility to develop, so it needs to be comfortable with the framework. So you have to choose the framework this way. And what is really important, the last word about this is to see that there is many ways to have a web mapping application, to have web mapping architecture based on a component, based on a state or not, based on clean architecture or not, based on a framework or not. And for all of this, we cover a good experience, a good knowledge, and we can provide guidelines, and we as Camptocamp, but you also as developer or as your team, you will always find a concrete and great solution for your needs. And yes, and following this presentation, Guillaume will now take a specific use case, presenting a project without any frameworks, and see how it can work well with all of these patterns. Thank you.
Thank you, Florent. Are there questions?
Okay, there are no questions. There are no questions. If you have questions, please add them to the slides. Okay, there is a question in the chat. Would you please share with us the current CityGML 3D? Florent?
Yes. OpenLayers at the moment is not focused on 3D rendering, so there is no real 3D possibilities to render 3D data. So it doesn't support CityGML that I think is 3D tiles or more something focusing more cesium or 3D mapping libraries.
Okay, this answers the question. So please hand over to Guillaume for the architecture application of the geological viewer. If you have questions, please state them in the slide 60. Guillaume, it's yours.
Still muted. Can you hear me now? Yes? Is it clear? Okay. So before presenting, I will just have a few words about me. So I'm Guillaume Bérodeau. I'm an architect at Camptocamp, and I'm part of the OpenLayers and Cesium communities. So I worked on many applications, the Swisstopo Geoadmin, the NGM Swisstopo Geology Viewer that I am presenting now, but also the Swiss Mobile application, Luxembourg Geoportal, Swiss Alpine application, and many more. So the Swisstopo Geology Viewer, so it's called NGM, and it's a project that is ongoing now. And so here in this slide, I want to show that it really is kind of standard viewer like we are used to. So you can see here at the top there is a geocatalog. So it's a hierarchy of layers, organized layers, where from which you can pick, and then it comes in the active layers, and the active layers is the standard list of layers. Each one you can order, delete, change opacity, enable or disable, and here you can also zoom to the extent of the layer. Of course, we handle translation. So in Switzerland, it's very important to be able to localize the applications. So at the top, like very standard, we have all the language we support. When you change the language, it immediately updates the UI without losing the state where you are, without reloading the application. You have advanced search. So here is if you type something, you are going to fetch from multiple data sources the data. So it's in Switzerland, so it's very important for us to get data from Geoadmin APIs. So we can have the address, for example, you can have the list of layers, and you have advanced functionalities like when you click on a layer, then it gets added to your active layers, and you directly see it in the viewer. We have the permalink. So at any time you change the state of the application, it updates a permalink, and then you can share it with someone, and it's the other person can see exactly the same thing as you. What is original is that this viewer doesn't use OpenLayers. It's a full 3D viewer, and it's using the Cesium JS mapping library. And so that's why when you see you have terrain, you have shadows. Now it's a new functionality we are implementing, is to be able to go underground in Cesium. So you have 3D models. There was a question about having CTGML, and yes, this is possible in Cesium. You can transform it and display it at 3D tiles or GLTF. So yeah. When we started thinking about the architecture of the project, we, like Florent said, every project had different needs, and these needs is really important to get them clear at the beginning of the project. So one characteristic of this project is it's a long-term project. It's 5 to 8 years long, and being able to work, I mean, have it running, have it being able to add new functionalities, and it doesn't being obsolete during the 5 to 8 years is really important. So it is one important key, success key of the project. Of course, another characteristic is that it's Cesium, so it's full 3D, there is no open layers, and of course when you design, you should take it into account. A good thing about the project is that there is no requirement on the obsolete Internet Explorer, and we'll see later how it change the architecture and what it enables. So the first question we had, so is the usual question when you start a project, is how will be the life of the project? What do you expect? Are you okay with at some point in the project throwing everything that you wrote and start again? So that is the full rewrite strategy. Or do you prefer to invest regularly during the life of the project to upgrade it and make it always in the up-to-date state? So like you know, you may have discovered the dependencies of the projects. They can reach the end of life and before you expect. So yes, it really happens, and yes, it was the case with AngularJS, and it will be the case. It's always the case with something you are depending on. So it's important to think about it and to have a strategy. So for NGM, we wanted to be able to replace some of the technologies we rely on without having to rewrite the whole project from scratch. So that means we need some isolation to be able to achieve this, and some choices. So one important point, part of this strategy is to rely on the standards. So WW standards is so when you use the standards, you know that the goal of the standards is to last longer. So your code also is going to last longer, and you have kind of a guarantee. So you certainly know about it because you are from the GIS domain, and for GIS there is OGC that is standardizing, and when you do a WMTS, you do WMS, you know that yes, it's here to last. So for the web, it's the same. There are standards. It's handled by the WWW consortium, and historically they were dealing with the ECMAScript standard. So it's a standard design name for JavaScript. And nowadays there is one new version every year coming out, but that really says how you should write your code, and how if you write like this, it will last in the browsers. And there is a newcomer in these standards. It's the web component standard, and it's a standardization of this kind of construct. So you get able to create your own elements and integrate it with any application. So we wanted to use agile methodology applied for architecture. So saying it's a project we start from scratch, and yes, we know we want to be able to develop it for many years. At the first sprint, we will focus on having something, the minimal thing we need to deliver the first sprint, and then the second sprint, third, fourth sprint. Each time we want to evolve, and at each time we just need to depend on what we really need. So we didn't want to depend on frameworks. So there is something that may be not clear in the presentations, is that there is a distinction between what is a framework and what is a library. So for example, React is a library because it's only focused on one single thing, is the UI part. So it's just handling the UI. But on the contrary, AngularJS is handling the UI, but also when you do some requests, HTTP requests, or how you organize your code with dependency injections and things like this, it does much more. It brings you all the capabilities of the project. So when you choose to go with a framework, normally you get everything from the framework to manage your code. And if you go with the library, you go with several libraries, and you are going to compose yourself the set of libraries you need to make your project. So it's the way we choose, thinking that when you go with smaller and specialized libraries, if there is one of it that becomes obsolete during the life of the project, then changing it with another, it costs less and it's more manageable. Usually, so nowadays, at least, frameworks also come with a full build chain and everything. That's sometimes hard to change and customize to what you need. But actually, a complete build chain, you can do it with less than 200 lines, and it's easy to implement. It's easy to change. Also, when you organize your code in terms of components, like Florent explained before, it helps also organize your code and also be able to change one component with another one if you like to. So if you have a good separation of concerns in your applications, then you can say, oh, I don't like any more of this search bar, and how about changing it with something else? And it's not just going everywhere in your project and figure it out what depends on the search and why, but it's really separate, and you can change it. It's something you can do. And when you really think about separating the concerns in components, then you can also imagine sharing it with other people, because it's independent, so it's pluggable. As easily as it's pluggable in your code, it can be pluggable in other people's code. So it becomes interesting. You have a better organization of your code, and you have the possibility to share with less effort with others. So, like I said, we are in an agile way. So at the moment, we rely on a few lightweight libraries, but as the project evolves, we might decide to add a framework or more libraries. So it all depends on the actual needs. And yes, so one just point I was forgetting is that I think it's really important that you enjoy doing the refactoring, because you will need to have to do it. So the more you do it, and the less you are frightened when you have to go on doing a big one. So Another interesting point about the support of the browsers. So anytime you need to choose which browser you support, and we had the chance that we did not have to support Internet Explorer. But even if it's like this, we do care about users that are still using Internet Explorer. So the idea is not to ignore the users, but it's to show to them a nice looking page where when they reach your application, and try to convince them that yes, it's a nice application. Maybe if you accept to try the browser with support, then you will be able to get something interesting. And in the end, when you are able to really have a clear limit about what you support and what you don't support, you are able to organize, to choose, to organize your code, simplify your architecture. Because you may know that developing for Internet Explorer, it has a big implication of on the code, on the way you code, on the way you pack your application, and the way you deploy it. There is some line that skipped, but at the end, normally there was written that but if we had to support Internet Explorer, so it's not really possible with Cesium and all the performances we need, but we could maybe have proposed kind of 2D map based on OpenLayers or something, so that people still get something. So this is also an approach that is interesting. So what about sharing with the community? For NGEM, so it was not part of the requirements for the architecture. But what I find interesting is to ask the question, so can we share code with our architecture, or UI components with others, and can they integrate it in their project, or is it specific to one technology stack? And with our architecture, it's actually possible to share things. So we have externalized the search bar, for example, and it's in this project, and you can very easily integrate it in any framework, any library, even no framework, because it's just standard W3C component. So you may know that sharing code at the JS level is easier than at the UI level, but if you really want to do it in the cross technology way, you can do it with web components. Another point that we investigated is that it's a viewer that we have, and the viewer it's also the interaction you have with a viewer is standard. Is it 3D? Is it 2D? Is it Mapbox? Is it Cesium? Is it OpenLayer? Still, when you want to draw features like points, lines, and polygon or rectangles, you are always expecting the same interaction with the browser. So it may be interesting to go in the direction of building a cross mapping library interaction code, so that you can draw and share with many projects the same feeling for the users. So yes, so why this project is interesting? As conclusion, so clearly it's a modern viewer. It has this agile architecture that allows partial rewrite. It puts the focus on the standards, W3C standards. It has a strategy for unsupported browsers. There is a potential to develop tools for cross-mapping library. And yes, it's broadly reusable. It's framework agnostic, so it should be able to integrate with many things. Okay, so that's it, and now I will see for the questions.
Are there questions? not, let's move to the next talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have an image or no? I can see what you have. You have to take the lead somewhere. Turn on here or something. Yeah, but okay. I can see this in the front page. So, can you see the presentation or not? I don't see it on my computer.
Do you see our presentation?
No, not yet.
Okay, so you have to take the lead somewhere. If you close this slide on the side, you have here, resume your presentation.
It starts.
Okay.
Now we see it.
Okay, so let's start. So we have one big project on our hand here. As you have said before, AngularJS is end of life at the end of the year. So we have to rewrite our whole Geoportal. And in the process, we have thought about what we want for the future. And so we have set some goals that what we want to achieve with this rewrite. Some of the things I will say is kind of a replay of what Florent has just said before, so sorry for that. So we want to use a state management solution because we've found out that it's a bit hard to manage code that hasn't separated the management of the state and the view. That's one of the main issue we have right now with the viewer. We want to use again, an existing framework like React, Vue, or Angular because we believe it's a good asset to have. And we want to be mapping framework agnostic, a bit like what was said by Florent before. We want to be able to switch between framework because we have a couple needs that can't be achieved by only one framework. So next. So first thing, we want to have a state management. I don't think I will spend too much time talking about it because I think Florent already explained what are the benefits of it. But mostly we want to be component oriented and have many dump component as possible, as many dump component as possible, and have most of the logic managed by the state or the store, and depends on which framework you use, the name is different. But we really want to have something that goes top down and not have UI elements changing something directly in the framework like OpenLayers. We really want to go through this top down philosophy. You can go next. So we want to use one of these frameworks, despite the shortcoming of them becoming obsolete in a short period of time. It can be 2, 5 years, depends, we'll see. But we strongly believe that current JavaScript frameworks are a great asset as long as you follow the guidelines and best practices they provide, as they kind of tackle all the youthful error you could do and prevent you from going straight in a wall by guiding you by the hand. So that's one thing we want to have. Plus, it's great to have something that is common in the industry. So if you want to find some manpower, you can really make use of having, okay, we use this framework, and you know which profile you want to find. Regarding all the 3 big frameworks, we mainly focus on Vue and React. As Florent has said before, we have discarded Angular because we found it a bit too much complex for our needs. So we are mainly focusing on the two others. And we are using those because they enforce the component approach, which is what we want to have. Plus, they integrate well with some of the Flux philosophy framework like Redux or Vuex for Vue. Yeah, that's it. You can go next. So, regarding the framework agnostics, we want to be able to switch between solutions because one of our needs is to have both 2D raster, 2D vector tiling, and 3D in our viewer. So it's not possible yet to have only one ubiquitous framework that does all. So we will have to switch between them. Actually, it's made with currently it's made with a bridge, and we would like to go a different approach with the state management, where the viewer, the mapping framework, is used only for the view, the rendering, and the component that place it in the page is responsible to translate the state into something usable by the viewer, the render engine per se. So that's really the goal we have in mind. So we can, for instance, switch between OpenLayer when we want to show a base map raster, and then switch to Mapbox when we want to show some vector tiling, and make use of their optimization they have made for mobile phones or other device like this, and have the same viewport, the same zoom level, the same layers activated and visible in the same order, all that kind of stuff. So to check if this is possible, we have coded a little proof of concept app on Code Sandbox. You can look at that with the link below. It's still a prototype, so don't expect it to work fully in all aspects. I'm really happy to know that we will have JSON style-based styling in OpenLayers, because I've thrown the towel about styling in this proof of concept. I didn't want to spend too much time on this, so I just skip it. So don't expect to see any JSONs in the OpenLayer render in this proof of concept. Otherwise, you should be able to see the same viewport in all frameworks except for Leaflet, because they only use rounded zoom level. So if you zoom in OpenLayers or Mapbox and you have a 5.5 zoom level, Leaflet will use 6 or 5, so it's not exactly the same viewport. But otherwise, you should see the same place where you have left. I'm done with what I wanted to say, so I don't know if you have any question about where we are headed.
Yes,
there is one.
I had a question, but I don't see it.
I think we have. I see it on the other screen. I don't know if the editing is showing live when you share that like this. So the question is it a goal to share code with others? Have you a strategy already? Guillaume asked it. So maybe Christophe, you want to answer that?
Well, I think it's a bit. I think it's a bit what also what Florent said before. It might make sense to have certain parts on a level that where it makes sense to share them. I mean, sharing it has always two aspects, and one aspect is you can profit from the work of others. And the other aspect is you have a dependency to someone else. and as we all know, it's always a trade-off. So I think sharing can make sense for things like encapsulation of frameworks, like creating a clean component integration of, let's say, OpenLayers for React or Vue. Things like this, I think it absolutely makes sense to share them, because there's no business logic involved. When it comes to the parts that concern really the application itself, say state management and the business logic parts, there I see less advantage in developing things to be fully reusable, because usually that's the parts where you want to have fast iteration. You want to be able to modify quickly without having to synchronize with others. So I mean, this is probably also a thing to discuss afterwards, when we now see that applications and application architectures evolve in a way to separate things or encapsulate things, to make sure that also OpenLayers is ready for this and has components that are reusable without having, for example, state management done by the library itself. So having a rendering canvas that is reusable and easily integratable into one of the big application frameworks. I think there is the part where sharing makes sense and where continuous community development makes sense for OpenLayers.
Okay, thank you for your reply. And for example, I'll talk about the drawing feature. So I think it's something you have in J1min, and that you probably will want to keep. And it's not really something UI, and it's kind of, like you said, a kind of abstraction that it's not just abstraction, but it's kind of something that is in front of several mapping libraries. For something like this, that could be a collaboration, you think, or?
Maybe if it's the way that it's done in the POC here is basically that the mapping framework takes care of following user input, translating that into coordinates, and then sends back the coordinates as event to the handling application framework, and then the application framework decides what to do. In this case, it just puts the points together and sends them back to one of the rendering frameworks as a GeoJSON. So the control is kind of taken away from the mapping framework, but you could even imagine that, like, taking control of user input is done by one framework, and then effectively rendering the drawing is done by another framework. So it's really using the framework that's best for a specific task. If it's, I mean, one strategy could be
kind of now drawing is tightly integrated in OpenLayers. I don't know if it could be a strategy to separate it and have it a specific component, but it can as well be left inside, and then if an application needs drawing, it can use this functionality from OpenLayers, given that the state is not managed by the framework, by the mapping framework, but by the application framework. So we basically already have shared the drawing functionality. It's just the question is who takes care of it, who manages the state.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll answer straight into the next. I'm copy pasting a link just after where you can see the full code if you want.
Okay, just a general way, we would like to share as well in the future whatever of code we produce here at the Gov agency. Formerly, we are now allowed to share source code which are generated by taxpayers' money on a public repository. That's a final decision we have here in Switzerland, or at least a strategy. So we would like to share our source code in future. Sharing is caring, but you have always to take responsibility of the code you share. So it costs us actually quite a lot of effort also to support all the questions and maintain the code. So that's just that point. If there's not another question, and I can't see another question, I propose that we make now a 15-minute break. And very important, during this break until 14:45 Central European time, please fill out for the following partner workshop the slides in the next chapter from page 68 onward. You see for each participant or participant organization a slide with 4 questions. Fill them out and also announce a presenter by name so we can give him the microphone afterwards. And the goal is that you present with max 2 minutes your current status of the viewer applications used, the technical issues you encounter with OpenLayers, your specific expectations for the OpenLayers 6 map view framework or related frameworks, and your cooperation possibilities. Is it either financial, of a financial nature, or if you could contribute personal resources, and Varia if you have other proposals. So we will be back at 14:45 sharp. Until then, please fill out your slide. If your organization is missing, add it. You can just copy an existing slide. Everyone has read-write access. And we have 2 minutes to discuss. The processes will then be that the next speaker should present or denote his name in his slide. It's on the top, so we can unmute himself and then speak. Let's start with Chris Bucklin, slide 69. Chris?
Okay, so situation of MapGeoAdmin, comme Pascal a dit, current status is we're at end of life soon with our application framework, AngularJS. We are now in the progress of doing a couple of proof of concepts, and we'll decide about the application framework to use, which will be Vue.js or React by the end of the month. That's the goal. next generation applications will, and there I need to finish the sentence afterwards, so we'll probably or will likely use more than one mapping framework. So our expectations for OpenLayers are specifically in this direction to facilitate the state management by application framework. This means API input output should also be possible with JSON and not only OpenLayers objects. This is specifically true for styling, but also the other API calls, if they would accept and or return JSON, this would greatly facilitate the separation of state management and mapping framework. Then second point, facilitate the, I call it componentization. So to have, and this is a point that which Guillaume asked before, that could be shared or should be shared, create like official integrations or bridges for the major app frameworks, which are the three well-known. And then third one, mobile first. So performance should specifically also address mobile devices, both browser and native applications. Cooperation possibilities from our side that we currently see is certainly that we share our source code, and we could and would possibly also contribute to create integration or bridge for the app framework that we will choose for our next generation viewer.
That's it. If you have questions, you can denote it in the slide, or at the very end we have a mail group, the OpenLayers 6 funding mail group, so you can later follow up. I would like now to hand over to the next presenter, Luxembourg. Unmute yourself to give us a 2-minute overview of your current state.
Hello, Renaud is speaking. Do you hear me?
You have to speak a little bit louder.
I have some trouble with my...
Pump up the volume. Renaud, you have to pump up the volume a little bit louder. Can we hear you? Give it a try again. You're unmuted. Just speak, Renaud. Seems to be muted now.
Yeah, exactly. We don't hear you.
I think you are muted, Renaud.
Okay, Renaud, then I will try to summarize quick up what others see might not see on your slide. Your current focus is that you're using OpenLayers and you're using integration of vector tiles. What I can see as well is that you try to share as much as possible regarding the source code, if there's an interest, and I can tell you already now that we have huge interest, and you can also denote maybe your GitHub repo in this slide where we can see what you have done so far. If you have questions to Renaud from Geoportal Luxembourg, he will be happy to answer it via the mailing list at the end, or if you have his private email account as in the invitation, contact him directly. Then we hand it over to our friends from Germany, Thomas Aulinger. The stage is yours. Please unmute yourself and go for the next 2 minutes.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. This is Thomas Aulinger from the LDBW Bavaria, and we use OpenLayers within a fork from the Swisstopo WebGL admin, and so therefore their topics are also our topics, and we are keen, looking forward. What are the next step for this open source project? On the other side, we use the pure OpenLayer framework in some of our geodata shop modules, and we are very they are great for our stuff we want. Hello?
We hear you. No problem. Go on.
Hello? Oh, okay. Thank you. There was some technical issues. Our expectation for OpenLayers 6 a very good support of vector tiles in the Mapbox vector tile format. We already did some prototyping, and we used the Mapbox WebGL layer integration, and this would do the thing for us, but our own integration in OpenLayers would also be nice for us without the Mapbox GL.js layer, if it's possible. And also we want to support the mobile focus more on mobile devices, and progressive web app support, if it's possible, native within OpenLayers would also be nice. Our goals for the future are to found OpenLayers furthermore, and if it's possible, we want to contribute and to the MapGL admin project in future, and to aim a closer cooperation. We will discuss in the near future, maybe tomorrow. Yes, that's it. If you have questions, please, hello?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Thomas. We hand it over to François Bazard, Canton et République de Neuchâtel. François, do you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clearly, but do you hear me?
Yes, loud and clearly. Go on.
Perfect. Well, unfortunately, I'm not the right person because my colleague, which is competent in the matter, is not present today. Well, we use OpenLayers in the different projects, GeoMapFish, in the API, in different smaller applications in the canton. So I cannot tell you what our specific expectations were because I'm not so much involved in the project of OL layer 6 and our vision there. And as for the cooperation possibilities, well, this also has to be defined, but as always and as before for all the projects, we participate. I think there is also there are also possibilities for cooperation and contribution and sharing the code as we did before for other projects. But I cannot be more specific than that, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. François, I hand it over to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, stage is yours.
Thank you, David. So regarding Camptocamp, we currently and for years, we have a lot of OpenLayers projects, be it in Switzerland, France, and Germany. We also have different Mapbox vector tile pipelines. And here, one of the latest we propose, bearmaps.com is using PostGIS to generate vector tiles. So maybe it's interesting to have a look at this solution. Regarding our expectation for OpenLayers framework, we are looking forward for in-depth WebGL support. We really believe it's the future, or it's present, I would say, and we have as a community to develop this WebGL further. And also, we think there is a lot of potential for data with features like Florent could demonstrate at the beginning of the presentation. Regarding cooperation possibilities, Camptocamp for years invests a lot of its own money in research and development in community project. R&D is our largest project after professional assistance to our customers, and it's funded by Camptocamp. And so we contribute on a daily basis to the different libraries and open source communities, and I have to say there is a lot to do. So that the OpenLayers Association could support the community, I think it's essential to bring OpenLayers further and to keep up the momentum. So here the OpenLayers Association plays a big role in supporting the companies and the developers that are behind OpenLayers. Thank you.
Okay. Oli, do you hear us? Oliver Terrell from Geops.
Hi guys, do you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. So I'm Olivier Terral. I work for, at Geops in Germany. Mostly we use OpenLayers with, now we use it with the Mapbox.gl base layer with vector tiles. And we use OpenLayers for the complex layers and for drawing functionality, most of them. We are not 100% happy with this solution because we have to care about two API, the one from Mapbox and the one from OpenLayers. So we have some expectation for the future OL versions, especially to have the same functionality as Mapbox.gl and the same performance. I've seen there is a beginning with the point, but I think it's a lot of work to do it for lines and polygons. I forget to ask, but did OpenLayers guy plan to have the exact same functionality as Mapbox.gl, or it's impossible to have? If there's someone could answer that after. And for our cooperation possibilities, it has to be defined, but we will be happy to help if we can.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I took down the functional parity requirements down in the conclusion, so Mike can answer this at the end.
Okay.
Next one would be Hexagon Switzerland. Since no one filled out the requirements spec, I assume they're not in this telco, and I will skip to our friends from Nice AG. Anton, you're unmuted and you're online.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Anton. If you could turn up your volume a little bit, then you can continue.
I try.
It's perfect. It's good.
Okay. So we are using OpenLayers in the version 4, and we built a cross-platform application with Angular and Ionic in version 5. And now we have the native application in the iOS Android store and hopefully soon in the Windows store. It was built with Cordova. We expect from OL6 to have a better performance on mobile devices. Vector tile support for drawing, modifying the vectors. Maybe some automated testing functionalities, and also the WebGL support. Yeah, that's from my side.
Thank you, Anton. ITV Consult. Seems no one here, and no one filled out the slides. I will delete it, and we are at our friends from Carden and Partner. Dominic Straub, do you hear us? Can you speak up?
Yes, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, go on.
Great. So yeah, we have several projects where we use OpenLayers, and we made a fork of the viewer for the Torgau, and so far as I can see, we are mostly satisfied with the OpenLayers and for our use cases, but we are always looking forward for improvements. And for the cooperation possibilities, unfortunately, I'm the wrong person to talk about this, but I will check with the company, but we're always happy if you can help. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. GIS APP Consultancy Services Private Limited is not here. I will delete it and hand it over directly to Emmanuel from the OpenLayers Association.
Yeah.
Emmanuel?
Yeah, thank you. So current status, we released OpenLayers 6. We could fund this release and release it with the community. I would like, and we would like to thank all backers and contributors. It allowed to fund code sprints, many hours by the community in development work, and also some of the needed maintenance to do the release. What we are now looking for is to be able to improve the WebGL renderer with the lines and polygons and vector tiles. And so we are looking for support both to maintain the library, because the core developers, they split their time between library maintenance and development of new features or the WebGL renderer. And specifically, we would like to develop now a WebGL renderer for lines, polygons, and vector tiles. Thank you.
Okay, we made it nicely on time. There's still about 20 people in the chat. I will try to add it up in a wrap-up, in a quick wrap-up. The conclusion from the presentation, we have some key OpenLayers 6 takeaways. So WebGL is mandatory. Simplification of the API is one big step forward, as well the improvement with WebGL styling, especially the parameters. What we have seen is that it's not possible, or there are ways to bridging to other components. What has been strengthened out in the presentation about OpenLayers 6 and as well in the proof of concept is that we can now work with different components and users, developers like it. State management is a key access or key success feature, and the freedom to choose the framework which teams like seems to be one key goal everyone would like to see. Development in the future, and maybe this now it's personal, has to be framework agnostic, so we can ramp up the delivery time. If you take the expectations from the presentations before, or from you guys, from your participants, performance is still key. I observed that no one used the word Corona in this presentation, but performance all the time. So performance is really, really key. Vector tiles is an important topic. We have to work on that. And mobile and WebGL has to be continued. Especially mobile, it was a little bit silent today, but for us, the mobile first approach we should not lose. Then, as we all agree here, we would like to share code as good as we can, as it makes sense. And I would like now to give quick to Florent or Emmanuel feedback, or I would like to give also feedback quick on the question which was posed regarding functional parity with Mapbox, because this is something which came up quite often as well in the past during our test phase. Can I give it to you, Flora?
Yes.
Okay.
For the question about the parity, I think if from the beginning we tried to implement the Mapbox vector tile specification and Mapbox style specification, so we have in mind that we try to support exactly the same features, but I don't really know, because we haven't really started to implement the WebGL part about the text, the decluttering, the text positioning, the labeling, and all the Mapbox style specification, like comment dire,
okay, now
like
you're
all kind of dashes or anything like that, or
okay.
Yes, texture, textured polygon, etc. So I think the goal is to support the specification, but we will work step by step, trying to support the most basic features, and then depending on the possibilities and on the fundings, develop more specific and complex specification. I don't know if you guys want to add something or about that, Olivier or Guillaume. I think it's a bit early to tell what we will be able to do. Hopefully we can have a pure parity because we want to implement the specification, but I don't know if we will have blockers or something like that.
There's just one thing from Mapbox that is really not planned to be supported is the whole 3D or semi-3D part where you can tilt the map and show things extruded from the ground. This is something that's really not envisioned for OpenLayers, because there would be too much effort for.
Yes, is the question about Mapbox GLGS features or a question about Mapbox style specification support?
I think it is about the GS features and the tile specification. It's rather the question we often observe is we develop now OpenLayers based mapping application. Can we do the same with the Mapbox specification, the Mapbox code? I don't talk, it's about interoperability questions mostly regarding WMTS in different projections. Can we solve that? Yes, no. Can we import WMS? Can we import KML, etc.?
In Mapbox.js, you mean?
Yeah.
Mapbox, most important goal, and all the library is focused on that, is just about to render vector data in a beautiful way. And they have designed all the specification and all the library just for that. It's just about rendering library. So they pass through a lot of features because they don't really care. So I can't talk for them if they're going to support WMTS or KML. I don't know. I think OpenLayers does. I think we must see the opposite, have an opposite thinking about how OpenLayers can handle what Mapbox does, because we have the power to contribute to OpenLayers, and we don't have this for Mapbox. So I don't know how Mapbox will move forward. I think they are pretty happy about what they have, and they won't move toward our direction. So I think the best way is to use OpenLayers and try to have a good performances. But as Olivier said, we try to support vector tile specification and Mapbox tile specification. We try to have a very performant WebGL renderer for that, but we won't. I don't think for now we will try to have a parity with Mapbox.js. It's not the goal. And we, for instance, the example of Olivier with the clipping and not the clipping, the tilting for the 3D view is not in our scope at the moment.
Thank you. I think that fits our what we know and what we think makes OpenLayers great. It solves that what Mapbox doesn't solve. One last question for Emmanuel. If you speak about WebGL and pushing WebGL forward, what is the amount of work in hours or US dollars needed to bring OpenLayers 6 really forward? And we don't need exact numbers, but at least a house number, a size, some digits. Can you elaborate on this?
Thanks, David, for this unforeseen question. I think it's about man years effort. So maybe we could have 2 developers full-time a year to be able to catch up with these lines, polygon, and vector tiles effort, because this is exactly what Mapbox invested at the time with 1 or 2 developers working full-time on it during a couple of years. And so as it's open source, we can benefit from what has already been implemented. We don't need to do research and development from scratch. We can have a look at some other libraries implementing stuff like this. But still, it's kind of a huge workload. So I would say roughly, 1-2 man, something like this. So 100, 200, 300,000 of dollars.
If I can add something, the fundings for the release was, I think, 350 euros. And when we start to investigate on WebGL, we start to create a new WebGL vector tiles renderer, and we figured out that the API was a bit deprecated. And for us, the budget was not enough to say, okay, at the end of the release, we will have a WebGL renderer for vector tiles. And we already had a lot of fundings for this release. And we spend a lot of time working on other aspects. So just to tell that this question has been asked 2 years ago when we started this work. Will the budget be enough to develop a new WebGL renderer? And the answer was no, clearly no, because we didn't know where we were going to. It was a black box. So now we started a new API, so we have clear idea about the work to be done, but still, I think it's a lot.
Okay, Manuel, do you have something to add as OpenLayers Association chair? Otherwise, I would conclude this meeting.
No, I would like to thank all attendees for participating to this meeting, for the interest and support all these years before. And yes, I think it's great that we were 30 in the meeting and be able to, even in a difficult situation, we could hold the meeting in a productive way. I think it's we have a very good community.
Thank you. I can just follow up. Some last words. Thank you first. Second, we will provide a screencast. The URL will be added on the website and in this slide set. And if you have further questions, the last slide, you will find the link to the Google group where everyone can drop an email. And I will set this Google presentation read-only this evening, so if someone wants to change something, glance through tomorrow, it will be read-only and everyone can look at it. Next step, I hope we will initiate some nice initiatives and see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much for organization.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wish you a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye from Canada. Thank you.